Market's up, Chuck, and there's been a lot of talk recently about the 787 Dreamliner that Boeing has built, and they did recently test fly it, and it was very successful. Of course, created a lot of hype, and Boeing is obviously a company that's extremely well known, been in business a long time, but I think people don't really recognize how cyclical their business has really been. For example, if you look at Boeing going all the way back to 1991. I want you to notice that their earnings record has been very erratic. There will be periods where earnings have dropped for many years, and then periods where their earnings rise, and of course they fell during the last recession, then rallied again coming out of the recession. And I want you to notice the black line here, which is monthly closing stock prices, pretty much follows and reacts to what's going on the company's operating basis. Of course, during the recent recession, the price has fallen dramatically, and there was a lot of controversy and talk about delays on the 787. But now, since March or the end of February, beginning of March of this year, the stock has rallied from a low of 29 and up to its current 55, and they did have this recent launch of the Dreamliner. But I do want also to point out that this company, carries an awful lot of debt besides being cyclical. And if you look at it from the standpoint of, its long-term track record, you can see that, the company has actually underperformed the stock market over the last 20 years, generating about a 4.8% return versus the market's 6.6. That 4.8% return, I want to point out, correlates, very closely to the 3.8% growth that Boeing has, achieved, if you want to call it that, since this period of time. Now, I thought an interesting comparison would be to look at General Dynamics, the maker of the Gulfstream, as well as, they're a little more diversified in other areas than Boeing, just relying on the aircraft side, but they do make, several multi-varied forms of the Gulfstream airplane, famous Gulfstream airplane. But the difference here, really fundamentally, and by the way, I'm not considering dividends in today's blog at all. I'm just looking at the company strictly from a profits point of view. I want you to notice that the General Dynamics relative to Boeing has had a much stronger earnings and much more consistent earnings growth record. And their stock price has more consistently tracked their earnings growth as well. The company has, put together about a 9.5% growth rate. Now, they, like Boeing, had a big drop in value, and like Boeing, they've also recovered. But the difference is that, this company, because it's has a much more consistent history of growth, is currently trading at 11.2 times earnings, where Boeing is trading at almost 35 times earnings, but mainly because there aren't any earnings there. The only real difference here is that General Dynamics has continued to put together good earnings. When you look at it from the track record point of view, you can see that shareholders of General Dynamics have generated almost an 18% rate of return, again, versus 6.6 in the market. And, the difference between Boeing and General Dynamics is clearly earnings driven. It's a much more consistent grower than Boeing. So, the moral of today's blog was don't fall into valuation traps. There's a lot of hype and hysteria about Boeing today because that Dreamliner has been a long-awaited project, and it probably will help them. But you got to realize that, you're paying a rather high multiple to buy this company right now, and it really all depends on what the earnings are going to look like going out for the next year or two. If the Dreamliner turns out to continue to be successful, you could be in one of these areas where you get a nice rally in Boeing. But, I caution you to be very, very careful and do your homework. There's a lot of debt in the balance sheet here, and there's a lot of risk in a company like Boeing. Anyway, I thought that'd give you some interesting insight into, what the aerospace industry looks a little bit like today. This is Chuck Arnvell saying thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.